Welcome to your astrological forecast for the week of Monday, December 5th through Sunday, December 11th, 2022. Before we get into the actual forecast, I did have two things that I wanted to mention. The first is probably more exciting. So the first is I am lowering my rates for birth chart readings. I was previously charging $50 per reading. Now I'm lowering that to $40. And this is kind of just like a holiday special. So if you're interested in getting a birth chart reading for yourself or for someone you know, maybe, you can check out my website for more information on all of that. It's manic.mercurian.net, and that is in the description as always. The other thing I wanted to mention is if you've been following my week forecasts lately, you have probably noticed I've gone through a little bit of an identity crisis. I was really struggling with, you know, I don't know, thinking of maybe changing the approach that I do with these forecasts, maybe breaking it down by sign, so having a different little forecast for each of the signs, and I did dabble with that over these last couple weeks. I do enjoy that, but after really debating it for a long time, I do think I'm just going to stick with what I was doing before. I would like to do two different forecasts like I did last week, but for the algorithm, it does hurt me a little bit because then my views are sort of divided if everyone doesn't watch both of them. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm mostly just going to stick with what I've been doing. Although I do think the views may be a little bit lower for this type of content, it is more astrologically sound or maybe advanced, and it's more interesting for me to analyze and read as well. Honestly, if I'm being completely honest, when I do the forecast by sign, it's very simple to do. It's almost like kind of basic addition. You just take the aspect or the whatever alignment is going on, and then you apply it to whatever house is whatever house it's falling in for that sign, and it's very straightforward and almost kind of robotic if I'm being totally honest. However, that being said, I do think I would like to have that approach maybe for astrological events. So like, for example, maybe like outer planetary ingressions or eclipses, things like that. Or if we have a full moon that's got some crazy aspects to it, I might break it down by sign. But as for just these weekly forecasts, I'm just gonna keep it simple and do what I've been doing. So anyway, I just wanted to give you a kind of an update with the channel if you were interested. But yeah, with that being said, let's get into the week forecast here. So for this week, we have three main things going on. Mercury and Venus are changing signs, so I guess that's two of the three things, or one of them. Both Mercury and Venus will leave Sagittarius this week and enter Capricorn. So that's a big mood shift. It's almost like we're sort of starting Capricorn season a little bit early. The sun is, still in the middle of Sagittarius, so, we're definitely not there yet. But with those two inner planets moving into Capricorn, you're definitely going to notice kind of a mood shift, I think. Capricorn's such a more stoic sign. And really, if we just compare Sagittarius and Capricorn for a moment, we have one of the most optimistic, joyous, just kind of carefree, what's the word? Like Sagittarius is a little bit hedonistic. It wants to just enjoy itself and, not worry about anything. And Capricorn is very different. Capricorn is, investing in the future. It's, likes to take things seriously and make sure, everything is going according to plan and whatnot. It's not nearly as spontaneous. It's much more methodical. So that is a huge shift. Signs that are next to each other are typically very different, but I think Sagittarius and Capricorn are particularly very different from one another. So with those two inner planets shifting signs, we will notice that for sure. Mercury representing our mentality, our intellect, our communication, how we are communicating, what we are communicating, what information we come across. All of that will take on a more Capricornian nature, kind of like how I just described. And then same with Venus, representing our desires, our pleasures. So we may be a little bit more, maybe more kind of serious or more practical going forward. We also have a full moon this week as well, and it's in Gemini, so that's a pretty crazy kind of fun one, I think. Although of course I may be biased, but this is a fun dynamic here. Sun and Sagittarius opposing Moon, or technically Moon is opposing the Sun. Sun in Sagittarius, Moon in Gemini. So really, full moons are about the the axis. It's not just the moon that's full, it's, it's opposing the sun. That's what a full moon is. So combining Sagittarius sun with Gemini moon, pretty crazy, pretty fun. It's fire and air clashing together, mutable fire with mutable air. Yeah, and I'm going to save the rest of my analysis for that particular day. I don't want to go too much into it. Other than that, though, for this week, the moon will be transiting from Taurus through Leo, and I really love that. I think the moon does very well in all of these signs: Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and Leo. It starts out exalted, and then I would say it's in joy in Gemini, it's in domicile in Cancer, and it does pretty well in Leo as well. So all in all, I think this week looks pretty good for having kind of like a upbeat, general kind of attitude. I think it can be difficult for some people to experience planets go, from such a happy-go-lucky sign like Sagittarius into Capricorn, which is, it. I think Capricorn itself is a bit of a challenging energy. Capricorn wants to be better, it wants to improve, and that's awesome. But I think sometimes that can put a damper on things, if that makes sense. And Capricorn people know this because they experience this all the time. That they're very hard on themselves. So we experience this a little bit. So there is that, and there's like that minor kind of side note. But other than that, we still have Sun in Sagittarius, so it's still this kind of like holiday celebration vibe going on, and then that's gonna really kind of blow up when we have this full moon as well. Okay, so that's enough said, I think. Let's get into the day by day forecast here. Okay, so we start out Monday, December 5th, and I think I left off my last forecast saying, although, we have Sun in Sagittarius and Moon in Taurus, and although those energies are very different, there are a couple things they have in common. Both are ruled by benefics, and so both are focused on enjoyment. Let's relax, let's have fun, let's enjoy, the pleasures. Let's enjoy good food or good drink or what have you. Sensual experiences, experiences in general, good experiences. So we may be a little bit more hedonistic. I think this is excellent though for, if you are following like these Western holidays like Christmas and such. I think Sagittarius and Taurus could be very focused on like gifts. So if you're shopping, something like that, there's a million different ways we can interpret and experience these energies. Obviously, that's just one that comes to mind for me. But yeah, these both these signs are ruled by benefics, so this is a generally a pretty good easy time. And Moon is exalted in Taurus, so this means that we kind of have the best chance collectively of being emotionally kind of even keel and solid, stable, grounded, taking care of ourselves and having good boundaries, but also being receptive to others and nurturing, when it's appropriate as well. So yeah, Moon is kind of, it's in this like privileged sort of state in Taurus, so that is nice. Monday though is interesting because Moon, although the Moon is exalted, like I kind of just described, it will cross over both Uranus and the North Node. Not in that order. It'll first cross over the North Node and then Uranus today on Monday. So that does bring some kind of like bumps into the road, a little bit of unpredictability and kind of karmic, events happening. Um, Nothing crazy serious. This isn't really aspecting a whole lot, but I definitely think it's something worth mentioning. It could kind of bring some excitement or kind of zany energy, unpredictability into the day. It could also bring volatility to stock market, the economy, things like that, because it isn't happening in Taurus, which has to do with finances. So yeah, expect a little bit of the unexpected, but again, we still have Mercury, Venus, and Sun in Sagittarius, which just wants to have fun, have a good time, maybe learn something new, and then we're mixing that with Moon in Taurus. Let's be sensual. Let's enjoy. Let's be practical as well. This is a good mix. I really like this for a Monday as well. There's a little bit of weirdness or wackiness. Nothing too crazy, I don't think. But overall, it looks like a pretty strong positive day. Oh, one last thing I want to mention about Monday before I continue on. So, also with this chart, the planets are fairly scattered. We have I don't know if I can use my pointer. Let me see. Sometimes it shows up and sometimes it doesn't. It's not showing up right now. But we do have a couple like little clusters in Sagittarius and Taurus, and those signs themselves are very different. And then other than that, the planets are pretty scattered. So this kind of works out for basically everyone. Of course, if you have a certain chart that's landing a certain way, this could be extreme for you, but for most people, you're gonna have some harsh aspects and you're gonna have some harmonious aspects as well. It's gonna be a little bit of a mix because of the mix we have here. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's kind of the best shot at like a kind of an even keel day for everyone involved. So definitely kind of a nice vibe for a Monday. Oh, okay. One last thing. This is the last thing I promise. But for Monday, the other thing we have going on is the moon is gaining light, of course. Like I mentioned, there's going to be a full moon this week, not happening quite yet. But on Monday, we will already be able to feel this kind of ramping up energy, and especially as the moon crosses over North Node and Uranus, bringing in that kind of wackiness. We'll experience that wackiness at the same time as the vibe is kind of gradually intensifying these couple days before the full moon, if that makes sense. Okay, let's go forward to Tuesday. So Tuesday, December 6th, we have both the moon and Mercury are changing signs today. Excuse me. So first the moon will leave Taurus and enter Gemini. Looks like early afternoon Eastern Standard Time. And just shortly after that, Mercury will leave Sagittarius and enter Taurus. So like I kind of mentioned at the intro, Mercury changing signs shows a shift in how we're thinking and communicating. Instead of being super, maybe kind of brash and just off the cuff and spontaneous with our thinking and learning, like Mercury and Sagittarius would suggest, now we may be a little bit more focused and strategic or disciplined, more intentional with our mental energy, mental processes, if that makes sense. Um, yes, and then it's kind of interesting too. So speaking of this mental energy, we also have Moon entering Gemini. So this is, as I mentioned, this is the sign where the moon will be full. So now we're really starting to experience that full moon energy, even though it's not technically happening quite yet. It's not going to happen on Tuesday. If you see the moon in the sky at night, it's going to appear pretty much full, almost full. So with that comes the kind of intensity, a lot of energy for sure. We are dealing with a yang axis here. Both Sagittarius and Gemini are masculine. They're action oriented. They're spontaneous. So, when you mix not only a full moon, which is already action oriented and very energetic, but also putting it in an air sign opposing the sun, which is in a fire sign, this is action, this is activity that we're going to want to get out there, explore. That's what Sagittarius and Gemini are all about, is exploring and learning and trying new things. Both these signs are very open-minded. They love information and coming across complex or weird concepts or experiences. Really, Gemini and Sagittarius have a lot in common, I think, for opposing signs. So all of that is what we're going to be embracing in a very kind of energetic, frenetic sort of way. Definitely ramping up on Tuesday before the full moon is technically exact. Okay, also do have one aspect. So right before Mercury enters Capricorn, so like the first half of the day, we could say Eastern Standard Time, Mercury does square Jupiter. So Jupiter is about to leave Pisces. It's very close. It's at the last degree of Pisces, almost ready to enter Aries, and then basically right before Mercury enters Capricorn, it does make that square. Kind of like a side conversation as both of them are about to leave their respective signs. They're both traveling at very different speeds, obviously, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. It's very interesting when planets have aspects at the last degree of a sign like that, because the last degree of signs are intense. It's an ending. It's sort of like a death in a way. It's like having your life flash before your eyes. So we are all experiencing this a little bit mentally with information. Like in other words, Mercury and Sagittarius at the last degree it's kind of wrapping things up, and you can have some would call it an echo of what you've learned during this Mercury and Sagittarius transit before Mercury enters Capricorn. So that's happening at the same time we get this aspect. Um, Mercury, any Mercury Jupiter aspect is great for learning and discovering new information. It almost, I mean, of course, the nature is going to be different depending on the aspect, but I was gonna say it almost doesn't matter whether it's a trine, a square, a sextile. It doesn't. Mercury and Jupiter, despite their differences, blend together very well because both have to do with being open to new experiences and learning. So here, yes, it is a square. Yes, that is a contentious aspect, but Mercury and Jupiter are at home in signs that are naturally squaring one another, and they're naturally at home in mutable signs, which what are the traits of mutable signs? They're open minded, they're flexible, they're adaptable, they can be open to something new. So, by their very nature, they blend together easily. Does that make sense? So, yes, this is a square, but I still think it's a great day for learning something new, especially regarding maybe metaphysics, spirituality, very like philosophical ideals, information regarding the nature of the universe. How does your world work? That's what we're focusing on, not only with Mercury still at the very last part of Sagittarius, but also Jupiter in Pisces is wanting to explore, the universe, spirituality, what's deep in your subconscious, things like that. So it may be a great day to kind of ponder these things on your own. It may also be a great day to have some really interesting conversations, or maybe come across some information that's new or kind of different than maybe what you are typically exposed to. Okay, moving right along. Wednesday, December 7th. We do get that full moon today. It's at 16 degrees Gemini. So it looks like definitely the latter half of the day, Eastern Standard Time for sure. Probably in the evening, looks like. And there is one main aspect that's sticking out to me. So this full moon will be conjunct Mars, which is pretty interesting. Mars just happens to be at 16 degrees Gemini, which is exactly um, where we'll get this full moon. Now my pointer's there. That's kind of weird. I swear it wasn't there before. Maybe I'm crazy, but okay. So I already talked a little bit about this full moon. Full moon in Gemini. Learning, being spontaneous, being very curious, exploring something new. It could just be exploring something new in your mind. That's what kind of Gemini would support. But it could also be through, maybe talking to someone new, talking to a friend, learning that way, learning from direct experience. Gemini just wants to learn. It doesn't care. It almost doesn't care what it's learning about or how it's learning. It wants any and all information, pretty much. Or I guess to be more accurate, Gemini has a very wide range for information and experience and wants to try a little bit of everything. So you may have strong Gemini placements in your chart and you may not, but we all experience this in different ways, branching out, trying something new. For those of you with a lot of mutable signs in your chart, this is going to be easy for you because this is right up your alley. This is supporting being flexible, adaptable. This is a time of change. I mean, it's pretty much always a time of change, but especially this, these signs correspond to the change of seasons. If you don't have a lot of mutable signs in your chart, this is going to be more difficult because you may not be as readily accepting of change. You may be more kind of firm or rigid in your identity, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different energy. It may help you though to loosen up a little bit and just roll with it. Full moons are crazy anyway. I think we all know that, but especially like I said, in Gemini, which is a pretty crazy sign, and opposing Sun in Sagittarius, which is a fire sign. I would expect a lot of activity and a lot of kind of unpredictability. So just roll with it. Just go with it. It might not make sense when it's happening. There might be a lot of crazy stuff going on. And specifically too, with a mutable full moon like this, within each mutable sign or placement, there's already so much going on. Just the Gemini moon on its own has so many different sides to its nature, right? But then now we're mixing in Sun and Sagittarius as well with this full moon, this opposition. So Sagittarius, same thing. It's a mutable sign as well. There's different sides to Sagittarius. I could delve into that further, but I don't want this to be too long. So my point though is when you're mixing multiple mutable placements like this, not only is each placement multifaceted, but then there's multifacets or multiple facets even larger than that, like expanding. It's almost like a, what do they call it? The Fibonacci sequence or the spiral that keeps going on forever. It's like there's layers upon layers and different sides within each side. So it's a lot to deal with. It's almost just too much. It's too crazy. It's like, I don't know. There's like this static in the air, and there's so much going on that you can't quite comprehend it all. And I don't think you're meant to. That's why I say just roll with it, go with it, be flexible if you can, because it's just gonna be kind of an adventure of a day, if that makes sense. um, okay, and then also, I have to of course mention again, this full moon is conjunct Mars, so that brings in even more volatility. Full moons are already a time of heightened activity and volatility, but with a conjunction to Mars, Mars is the warrior energy. It's the fighting energy. So I would be a little bit careful. Go out, have fun if you can, learn something new, be open. But maybe just, be careful too. Because with Mars aspects like this, there can be accidents for sure. I think accidents are already more likely with full moons because we're more active. There's more of everything happening. There's more good things happening. There's more mishaps, you could say. But yeah, again, with this Mars conjunction though, that does Mars aspects like this are synonymous sometimes with sometimes violent accidents, physical accidents. Um, what else? It could also bring in a little bit of edginess, and it's in Gemini. So with Mars conjunct the full moon in Gemini, um, it's tension and maybe at its extreme point violence, but this is in the world of Gemini, so it's mentally edgy. It's you know what I mean. It's like a debating energy. It's witty. It's wanting to fight someone with words or outsmarting someone. Intellectually edgy or competitive. Does that make sense? So that's kind of what we're experiencing for this full moon. I know that was a little bit rambly, but hopefully that makes sense. All in all, it looks like a definitely a crazy day, but I think this could be a lot of fun, just depending on your own placements and how you approach this. Just go with it, have fun, learn something new, and be careful. That's what my advice would be. I'm sounding like such a Virgo right now. Okay, yeah, I think that's enough for Wednesday. Definitely a lot going on there. Let's go forward here. Okay, so Thursday, December 8th. Technically, the Sun makes the opposition to Mars on Thursday, so we're still dealing with this opposition. Moon has already moved on. We'll still be in the kind of aftershocks of the full moon, though, because the full moon is still in Gemini, still very full. If you do get a chance to see it, it will appear pretty dang full. You know what I mean? So it's like we're still experiencing it. It's not as acute as it was on Wednesday. The activity may be slightly dying down a little bit, but that kind of craziness, that intensified activity, is still definitely continuing into Thursday. And then going back again to this, Sun is still opposing Mars, or technically Sun makes the exact opposition to Mars Thursday, not Wednesday. Um, so again, that's continuing this kind of volatility, and again, it's like mental volatility, mental competition, mental edginess, edginess with words, edginess with learning. It's kind of weird, it's almost very psychological and potentially manipulative. So kind of weird. What else here? Mars is also a very sexual energy. It could bring out sexual things, but like I keep saying, this is in the world of Gemini, so it's gonna be an intellectual sexiness or competitiveness or fight. There's gonna be this like intellectual or informational or psychological spin to this warrior energy, basically. So yeah, that continues on Thursday. If you want more specifics, really for the whole middle part of the week while Moon is in Gemini, I would look to where 15, 16 degrees Gemini falls in your chart, because that's where you might expect some volatility. I'm not going to go too much into detail on that. If you do want like a personalized reading, just hit me up. My email is always in the description. Um, but but yeah, a lot of this kind of craziness and heightened activity continues into Thursday for sure. Okay, and then Friday, December 9th, we do have another major ingression here. So in the latter half of the day, Eastern Standard Time, Venus will leave Sagittarius and enter Capricorn. So now Venus is joining her buddy Mercury in Capricorn. These two inner planets, and I think the inner planets that move the quickest, they affect us on such a day-to-day level that if that's the way you're kind of if that's the way you're thinking about things, if you're just focusing on the day-to-day, the day-to-day energy, Mercury and Venus are some of the most tangible planets in that arena. You know what I mean? Because they are short-term in nature. So there is definitely a noticeable shift in our day-to-day experience with Venus entering Capricorn. I don't know why I explained that in such a weird way, but yeah, now with Mercury and Venus both in Capricorn, like I said in the intro, this is going to be a little bit more stoic. Let's focus a little bit. Let's not just be everywhere like in Sagittarius. Not just adventuring just for the sake of adventure. Let's be a little bit disciplined. Let's be focused. Let's be practical. Let's think about what happens much farther down the road and then prepare for that. So it's feeling a little bit like the beginning of winter, like Capricorn season, like I said. Although technically we're not quite there yet. The sun is behind now, falling behind Mercury and Venus. But yeah, it's kind of a much more sober energy. Let's just put it that way. Okay. Other than that, though, on Friday we do have Venus. So same thing that Mercury did right before Venus enters Capricorn. Venus will square Jupiter. So this is so interesting too. We're having kind of a repeat thing, but now it's Venus's turn. Um, so Venus squaring Jupiter. This to me is potentially more problematic than Mercury squaring Jupiter. Um, Venus and Jupiter are the two benefics. They're the two planets that bestow upon us abundance and pleasure, and all these good things. We want the pleasure and abundance to just rain down on us, and Venus and Jupiter are oftentimes down to get behind that. Um, but when they're squaring like this, it's not as likely for us to just experience like overwhelming easy abundance necessarily. There's some kind of disconnect there between the maybe what we want and what we actually need, or between maybe what makes us feel good versus is this truly in our best interest, or is it truly, excuse me, is it truly like it may be pleasurable in the moment, but is this truly pleasurable like deep down on a more maybe like spiritual level? Things like that. Does that make sense? Um, I could also see like volatility economically as well with this. We do at least have Jupiter in domicile and Pisces, but then we also have to take into account, like I said with Mercury, when Mercury is making this aspect, both now Venus and Jupiter are at the last degree of their respective signs. So there's something really karmic going on with how we're experiencing pleasure, abundance, desire right now. There's something that's fundamentally changing about it. And this is going to happen relatively quickly, really just applying to Friday, and then like I said, already by evening Eastern Standard Time, Venus will be in Capricorn. So then, you know, again, much more stoic with how we approach pleasure and desire. We're wanting something that's going to really last for the long term and not just be, really fun for the moment, but then we have to pay for it later. We're wanting something really substantial with our pleasure and desire. So I think this is actually really great. This kind of balances out the Sagittarius Sun. Sagittarius Sun is great. This time of year can be so fun, overindulging and all that, but balancing it with these couple Capricorn placements, um, I think it just ensures that we're also focused on, stability and sustaining this pleasure or this abundance, if that makes sense. Being a little bit more careful with it. Okay, and then other than that, early Friday morning, Eastern Standard Time, Moon does leave Gemini and enter Cancer. So now Moon is very strong again. Moon is in domicile in Cancer, and Moon is beginning to kind of wane and lose light. It's still pretty full, more full than not for sure, but it is beginning to wane now. So we're starting to come off that like roller coaster. We're starting to come down from that high that was the Gemini full moon. And I think Cancer is a great sign for the moon to be in just following a full moon because it is a more kind of chill, relaxed sign. Yes, it can be very emotional for sure, but Moon in Cancer, we're more aware of our emotions and we're wanting stability, we're wanting comfort, we're wanting familiarity. Moon and Cancer energies love whatever's familiar to them. So being at home, being with people that are trusted and known already, or environments that are trusted and known and comfortable. So that's kind of the general focus for Moon and Cancer. And like I kind of touched on, Moon and Cancer insinuates that we're all feeling our emotions much more strongly. We're much more aware of how we feel, and that I think can be a blessing. Sometimes it's not always pleasant, but I think it can be a blessing because for a lot of us, we don't always know how we feel, and so it can be difficult to even know where to start. But with Moon and Cancer, you at least know your stance. You know where to begin. You may be in a hard place, but you at least know how you feel. You know what to do, kind of. Um, One last thing about this chart for Friday, there is a lot of strong Jupiter energy. Not only is Sun ruled by Jupiter, um, Mercury and Venus have just left Sagittarius, so they're no longer ruled by Jupiter. But still, we have Jupiter in domicile and Moon in Cancer, which is the sign of Jupiter's exaltation. So I think there's some kind of focus on welcoming abundance, not just abundance, materialistically, but emotionally as well. There's a lot of kind of water and fire going on, so mostly more water than fire, I guess you could say. So welcoming like spiritual abundance, abundance that you feel deep down, that kind of thing. Okay, going forward, um, so for Saturday, this strong Jupiter energy continues, and it will actually become stronger as the moon gets closer to the end of Cancer. Um, Looks like late on Saturday Eastern Standard Time, moon will trine Neptune, and this is kind of beautiful. Moon is in domicile in Cancer, Neptune's in domicile in Pisces. They make a trine, which is a very harmonious, easy aspect. So they're both supporting one another, and these are both very watery energies, so having to do with emotion, intuition, spirituality, soulfulness, um, things like that. And I find that water signs tend to correspond to times of either isolation or again times of being with really close, trusted other people, because the water signs are so emotional. We're so sensitive with these watery energies, so we're wanting to be safe, if that makes sense. Let's see, and then I thought there was one other thing I wanted to mention here. Jupiter. I think that's pretty much it. Um, oh, right. So I was gonna say, I always like to kind of assess if you wanted to go out for the weekend and do something. Yeah, honestly, it's kind of a mixed bag here. So Sun is still in Sagittarius, still, those party vibes, the celebration, the expansion and adventure. But then, like I talked about, we got the more miserly, I don't know if that's the correct word, or more prudent Mercury and Venus in Capricorn. But then now also blending that with these kind of watery energies, Neptune and Jupiter in Pisces, with these trines to the moon in Cancer. So really, I think I would kind of just go with Jupiter and Sun and Sagittarius. So this is kind of the holiday season. I know not everyone celebrates the holidays, but even if you don't, this is a time of year of celebration or indulgence in some way. I think that's sort of naturally how the cycles kind of went. You would go through all these harvests, and then you'd have this abundance at this time of year, before the fall really sets in and begins winter, if that makes sense, or before the winter sets in, I guess you could say. So this is a time of abundance. That's really what I'm seeing the most. We may want to be a little bit kind of low key, more chill with these watery energies with Moon and Cancer. Um, Typically with Moon and Cancer, we don't want to be too rowdy or crazy. We want to, like I said, we want to deal with what's already known. We want to be safe, secure, because if we're safe and secure like this, then we can kind of come out of our shell and be more vulnerable, if that makes sense. It's a lot of emotional kind of stuff. So really, you could kind of go different ways with this energy. It's kind of a mixed bag here, but I would say moderation for sure. Definitely more than anything else. Um, yeah, I mean, it looks like maybe having fun today, but maybe just keeping it close to home type of thing for everyone as a whole is what I would see. Oh, one last thing about that too. So, of course, it should go without saying, but with Moon in Cancer, everyone's more emotional, so that could be a reason to stay home too. Everyone's very much feeling what they're feeling, and that can obviously be intense, especially if, not everyone's aware of astrology like this, so they don't know Moon's in Cancer. So if they're out, you know, doing a lot far from home in a new place, that could be very, especially stressful today, I think. So maybe just keep it kind of close to home is what I would say, or go somewhere that you're very familiar with, that you know like the back of your hand. Okay, and then this really continues for Sunday, December 11th. However, um, in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time, Moon does leave Cancer and enter Leo. Right before it does that, though, Moon trines Jupiter. So I think this is kind of like sort of peak. It's at least a peak of the Jupiter energy. Like I talked about, the Sun is ruled by Jupiter. Jupiter's in domicile, and then now Moon is not only in the sign of Jupiter's exaltation and Cancer, but it's also trining Jupiter right before it leaves Cancer and enters Leo. So yeah, it's a good time to talk about Jupiter themes. Jupiter does mostly correspond to fire and water energies, and despite Mercury and Venus being in Capricorn now, which is of course Earth, I still think there's a lot of water and fire going on in this chart. So water and fire are the most emotional elements, and they have to do with spirituality and feeling. What do you feel? What's your pride, your emotion, your intuition, your I almost said insight. But yeah, intuition, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the focus here, and specifically with Jupiter. Jupiter is about all that, but in a exploring and venturing. How you can explore the world, have physical experiences, and then those experiences they help you to gain knowledge, and then that knowledge becomes wisdom, or the experience becomes wisdom over time. Um, or let me say it a different way, like gaining information or experiences, and then having that knowledge turn into wisdom. I find with Jupiter energies, as well as fire and water energies in general, when we mix a lot of fire and water together, or if we experience a lot of Jupiter energy, there's a lot of like wisdom and soulfulness. This isn't like smarty pants analytical energy and like knowing all the facts and like checking all the boxes like Gemini or Virgo or something. This is just wisdom, like having lived through something profound or deep, or something, especially with the emotional aspect of it, the spiritual aspect, that kind of wisdom. So I'm just describing these energies because these are things that kind of can come up, um, especially in the afternoon Eastern Standard Time, but also just really all weekend. Um, but on a more mundane level, water and fire also means more emotion, so everyone being a little bit more charged. I do think it's really nice having Mercury and Venus in Capricorn balancing this out, keeping us even keel, bringing some of that really steady, practical, long-term thinking from Capricorn. So I do think that's really, really excellent to kind of just ground all this. But yeah, this does change, like I mentioned. Sunday, Moon enters Leo. So this is going to be really nice because as the Moon is losing its light, we become a little bit more chill. Yes, Moon is entering Leo, which is very active. But Moon is going to be stepping into a trine with the Sun. So this is a more harmonious, steady, stable kind of energy. And I think this is also a little bit more of a party energy for sure. For sure. Sun is Sagittarius, Moon in Leo. These energies correspond to us really wanting to have a good time and live in the moment, like a YOLO energy. I can't believe I said that, but yeah, having fun in the moment, being spontaneous, being, very active and just feeling feeling kind of aligned in the moment and spontaneous like that. So yeah, and again, I think this is really excellent, bringing in these Capricorn energies, Mercury and Venus. We can be spontaneous, we can be over the top and indulge in things, but then also, make sure we're not overdoing it. Have some kind of moderation in that as well. I think that's what we're naturally gonna sort of do with these planets like this: Mercury and Venus in Capricorn, Sun in Sagittarius, Moon in Leo now. Okay, so that's what I have for you for this week. Stay tuned next week. We do have a third quarter moon in Virgo, so that's going to be sort of a crisis in consciousness, but also a good time to organize things and or maybe learn something new. There's a lot of like learning energies this time of year. That's kind of interesting. Sagittarius is so multifaceted for sure. There's so much going on, like learning new things, but also indulging. It's kind of all over the board. Pretty soon, though, we do have Jupiter entering Aries. I did want to just have a quick shout out. It's not going to be in my next forecast, but the one after that, it's December 20th. So yeah, outer planet shifting signs. That's a big deal. That's going to shift the kind of background environment or the vibe, and and I want to say again that we're approaching Pluto entering Aquarius in March. I know that sounds like it's kind of a ways away, but it's gonna sneak up on us, and then we're gonna enter some very very interesting times. So anyway, I hope this forecast helps you or is interesting, and I look forward to talking to you next week.